Um, cool. Welcome, everybody.
Oh,
Um, Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. This is we are Etra, and this is Eternami, and this is our third week of our Embodied series. And this week we're exploring creative work. So far we've spoken about creative community and creative purpose, I believe. No, creative community and creative culture, and this week we're doing creative work. And I guess I would start off by saying that there's quite a bit that's gone on recently within the current social climate over the past few weeks. And we've dove deep into ideas relating to the Black experience, what it means to be part of the community, and the nuances that do and don't define us.
right.
And so I suppose today we're looking at exploring some ideas of what the future for us as individual creatives might look like. It's an important conversation as we move forward. So we're thinking about tangible ways we can engage within our creativity, how we can better navigate our individual disciplines, and explore some tools and processes that we are each individually familiar with, but also and most specifically you, Ryan, things that you found quite useful. So you're a photographer, you're a creator, conceptualizer, thinker, yeah, and amongst many other things. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you continue to show up consistently. And this is undoubtedly something that many people find challenging. So I suppose maybe there's a few questions of and directions we can take to start. But if you could maybe just introduce yourself, tell us who you are for those who aren't aware, and give us a brief rundown on your work.
Sure. My name is Ryan. I go by Mr. KOA, not Koa. Many people think it's Koa. Don't know if you don't know who I am and you don't know that KOA is an acronym, you're gonna think it's Koa. So I don't take it personal. I shot a an Indian wedding in Mexico last year, and the whole imagine 60 Indian people all saying Mr. Koa, Mr. Koa, Mr. Koa, like for a week long. I can't correct them all. I had to just take it. I had to just be like, yep, I'm coming, and like so yeah, KOA is an acronym for King of Arts. King of Arts is the brand and the hub that I started in 2012 when I started my first company, which was essentially started off as a clothing line, and that happened after I got injured in university playing basketball. So I played for University of Ottawa basketball team, and I got injured. After getting injured, I got cut from my basketball team, and I was forced to pivot and find a different avenue, a different passion, and that passion became arts and creation. And I started off by sketching and drawing and writing, which expanded into the clothing line, which ended up expanding into my now photography profession. So I didn't plan to be a photographer. I didn't plan to, like some people, their whole lives, they're like, I want to be a professional photographer. I want to shoot. Like, that's people's dream. My dream was basketball. I want to go to the NBA. And that was taken from me. The opportunity to go to Spain or Europe and things I wanted to do was taken quicker than I wanted. And it's almost, it's almost like some sick, twisted dream. But now as a photographer, I got injured again. So currently I have my crutches in the back. Years later, now I recently tore my Achilles. Granted, playing basketball. So I can't stay away from the sport. So it's always been a passion of mine. So my biggest goal is to kind of find a way to synchronize my new career now with basketball. So I do, I do camps, and I do a yearly retreat in Barbados where I document a basketball camp for the kids of Barbados. And I feel like I quit my job 2 years ago, and since then I've really been able to utilize my time and energy in the ways that I want to. So but I feel like what's important that people don't actually realize is you meet people at stages right? You meet everyone at a different stage, a different level, and what you see or the perspective that you see when you meet them is very narrow, right? Like someone who meets me right now is like, oh my God, like he's traveling the world, he's shooting all these people, it must be amazing. It's like they don't know I got injured, they don't know I got quit, I got cut. They don't know that I worked in accounting and billing for 4 years and hated it. Like there's a process before I got to the point where now it looks amazing, you know? And even now there's a continuous need to, you know, recreate yourself and learn and expand, because, you know, even now, like there's still things I want to do further than now. So, but a biggest thing for me is that I want to be that person that I never had, especially in the Black community.
Mm.
I'm the oldest sibling of, I have 6 siblings. So I'm the oldest brother. I'm big brother, and I've always had that responsibility to lead, you know. And I feel like I remember when I was just starting and I didn't know anything about photography or anything, I would reach out to a couple people like, hey, like, you know, could you, but how'd you do that? Or I'd ask a question like, oh, how did you get your photo to look like that? Like I just didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I only asked a couple people, and I remember the responses were very limited. You know, we have this negative belief in the Black community that we have to do everything by ourselves and everyone needs to work for it to get there. And, you know, I work my ass off, so you have to do it and struggle too. Like it's a broken mentality. And I felt like, if and when I became successful, which I have, to an extent over this time, that I didn't want to follow that trend. So I'm adamant on, you know, I speak at schools, I speak for Black kids, I speak at camps, I help kids out, I give back, you know, I have these conversations with people, I have these conversations with kids behind me, below me. I outsource jobs. If I can't do something, I'll give it to somebody. Like even something so simple as that. Like we will not be able to do something ourselves, and because we can't benefit from it, it dies there, right? Someone be like, well, you know, Steph, can you do this project for me? You'd be like, I'm kind of busy with it right now, and it'll just die there, you know. Instead of us being like, I can't do it, but I know, if you know, you all know somebody. If you know someone who could potentially do something or has opportunity, and the opportunity didn't come to them directly and it came to you, you have the opportunity to make that connection. But we don't do that. We're just like, I can't do it, and the person's kind of like, oh, okay, and then it's stuck. It's like, well, you know, but we have to get used to being like, I can't do it, but here, let me make that connection. But it's such a deeply rooted mentality of like, if I don't get this money, then no one gets it. If I can't do something, then no one gets to do it. And it's just like it's an unnecessary competition within our own community that is killing us, you know. So
Yeah, no, for sure.
I feel like having these conversations and making the posts is all important, you know.
That's crazy. I appreciate that. And that's a really interesting and important point to make, just in terms of like, we don't need to harness everything for ourselves and just hold on to it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, you do need to have a little bit of integrity and protect your ideas. But that doesn't mean that you can't also, like you said, outsource those ideas. But I'm interested in kind of what strategies you took in terms of transitioning into your creative work. Because for a lot of people, that's a really difficult middle space where you're working a full-time job and you're also an artist or creative, and you're straddling, and it becomes exhausting. And so a lot of people kind of chuck their creative work to the wayside because it's not paying the bills. Like, and so we're looking at really tangible ways that you, coming from a business background, you maybe had a different and a more kind of a high level understanding of how to make these transitions. So do you have any kind of advice?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's probably one of my biggest advantages, especially when I'm, you know, doing talks and speeches and stuff. Like I acknowledge my advantage of coming from a business background.
Yeah.
You know, I acknowledge that, you know, it takes a lot more than just liking photography and becoming a photographer to run a business and a sustainable business, and to leverage your business, you know, and to expand it. Like it's more than just being good at photography, you know. When I quit my job, it was a series of stages, right? So I worked in accounting and billing for 3 years after I graduated, right? And I hated it. Like I hated the job, but I was like, I had this degree. I'm in debt from OSAP. Yeah, I would love to be my own boss and travel the world right now, but timing is a very important aspect of all business. And there's nothing wrong with working 9 to 5. I think we're also in this broken mentality where it's like, oh, you work a 9 to 5, you ain't shit. It's like, nah, bro. Like, not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is built to run their own business. There are people who excel working for somebody. There are people who are very good at working for somebody, and they have a crazy career and they make a lot of money doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I think being an entrepreneur now has become a trend. People think it's cool to work for yourself, but they don't want to put the work in. They don't know what actually goes into it, you know? And having my business background allowed me to understand what actually goes into being an entrepreneur, right? Like I have my Bachelor of Commerce Management degree. So I learned how to do accounting. I learned how to budget. I learned how to send emails. I learned how to speak. I learned how to, like, when you're an entrepreneur, you're all these roles. You don't just get to do the fun stuff. You know, you don't just get, I love creating, taking pictures. So that's all I got to do. It's like, no, you got to do everything now. You got to do your taxes. You got to do all these things. So having that background definitely helped me because I understood all these different layers of running a business. And then working for somebody for 3 years, I just stole all this shit that I learned from them. no joke. I'm like, yo, if I'm going to work for these companies for 3 years, all that stuff you trust me with, all this knowledge you're giving me, like training, all this, I'm like, cool, I'll use it. I'll take it. I'm not gonna use it for nothing. I'm like, I'm gonna use this because when I'm ready to quit, now I know how to do all this stuff. If I can run reports and budget for millions of dollars and set and draft emails to CEOs and blah 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 for you, like for me to do that for myself, that's nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm doing that for a company, and they're taking my work and putting that into meetings and they're pitching my stuff. Like, and now imagine me diverting that energy into just me, you know? So that's how I viewed the workforce. I was like, there's nothing wrong with working here, because if you want to work for yourself, take all this stuff, because this is a working business. This is obviously the company you're working for. It's working. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I started observing and watching all the stuff in my positions I was in and taking them as tools to be like, okay, cool. What am I doing on a day-to-day that makes this company run? What are they relying on me to do to make this company run? You know what I'm saying? And I would note those things. And then in between all this stuff, I'm still working on the side. I'm shooting on weekends and I'm burning out, right? Because I'm working 9 to 5. And then from like 5 to 12 a.m., I'm doing my stuff. And weekends, I have no weekend. And then it's Monday again, you know? So it's like you're just on this constant wheel of like, of energy exertion, and it gets to a point like you have to choose, you know? And what my decision making to choosing was very clear cut because I'm a numbers guy, right? And I was like, okay, cool. So I'll be transparent with you guys. I was making $45,000 a year working for my day job, okay? And $45,000 a year, full salary, full benefits, all that. Sounds like a great job, and it is a great job. It's more money than most people were making, you know. And it's to me, I was like, 45K, like, yo, this is pretty sick, you know. I had my weekends, like, this is comfy, you know. But then I was like, okay, I would shoot a project, and I would get paid maybe I would make up my own prices as well, right? So someone's like, hey, can you shoot this project? How much do you charge for this? I would be like, okay, here, this project is $500, let's say, right? That project takes me maybe 2 hours, 3 hours max, and they pay it. Cool. If I'm a numbers guy, I'm like, okay, my paycheck at my day job was about $1,300 or so every 2 weeks. Okay. Which breaks down into like $23 an hour. Okay. Which breaks down for the day into like maybe $130 or so after taxes, $130 for a day. Okay, like this is how I start breaking out everything. I'm like, yo, okay, I'm safe. You know, we stay at these jobs because they're safe, right? But if you actually break the numbers down, I'm like, you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you're making $130 a day. That sounds great. That sounds great when you like over a span of time. You're like, if I just keep doing this, I'll build up. But I'm like, but you just charged $500 for 3 hours of your time, right? Because you felt like it, and someone paid it. Because before you do anything, you have to have a proof that something works, right? If you make a price and no one pays it, then it doesn't work. But all you need to know is that someone paid it, which means you have something, you know? Once I realized that, I was like, okay, the only difficulty is the dream of being like, all I got to do is get a bunch of these $500 jobs and I'm fine. Like, it's not that simple, right? But it actually is. Like, we kind of like, we view it like, well, like, what if I don't get it tomorrow? And like, what if I don't get it? Like, you start viewing the downside of the potential, right?
Yeah.
And that's the hole that people go into where they're like, okay, I got this one job for $500, but like, what if I don't get another one? Like, what if next week I don't have, like, then what? I'd rather take this 130 a day consistent that I don't have to worry about it than trying to push for that 500, you know? And I was just like, okay, if I'm able to do that, I viewed it this way. I'm like, I'm giving this company 40 hours of my time every week, right? And if I made $500 in 3 hours, that essentially can last me 3 days of work, right? So you, Ryan, you have 3 days to find another $500. Basically, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and not like three, like after 5 p.m.s. Like, if you quit your job, you have 24 hours times 3 to find $500. You're telling me if I give you 72 hours of your time, you're not gonna find a way to make 5 bills?
Yeah. When you break it down,
if you can't do that, then you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. And that's, huh? What do you say?
I was going to say that's a really like tangible and material way of breaking it down that people can kind of make, because often the idea is really overwhelming, or the idea sounds extremely glamorous, or all of these things just come into your mind, and it's hard to say, do you know what, if I don't feel like I have the individual capability to reach that goal, then this is a decision that I'm able to make. And a lot of people don't feel as though they have autonomy over those kinds of decisions in real time. They feel the pressure. And I'm going to interject really quickly because I wanted to go back to the idea of the hustle, and that we often idolize and praise the idea of the hustle, but we can't ignore the real implications it has on people and their mental health. And so creating balance is hard. And often things like self-care can sound and look extremely gendered. When we think about self-care, we think about spa dates, and we think about getting your nails done, and all these things that women and men sometimes don't identify with. But the mental health implications are not gendered. They affect everybody in their own individual ways. So I'm interested in the idea of the hustle. When you're saying you've worked 9 to 5 and then you're going and doing a shoot in the evening, in the moments that you felt really burned out and overwhelmed, how did you keep your eyes forward? Like, what were the ways that you were able to engage in self-care for yourself as a man, as a Black man, and kind of, can you help me with that? And we'll talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think once you realize, like, there's a button in all of us. There's a switch in all of us. And once the switch is turned where you're committed to something, then there is no alternative, right? So if the switch hasn't gone off yet, then you still have an alternative. You're like, oh, I still could do this. But once you've convinced yourself that you're capable of doing something and you've seen it for yourself, there is no more alternative. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm burning out, but this is temporary, you know? And, you know, if you really do want something to happen, then you have to understand there has to be a hard part. Like, a hard part has to come. There is no, you can't skip it. You know, so that burning out part, I'm like, get through this because this will be worth it, you know? And the continuous self reminders of, you know, the bigger picture. It's like, okay, yeah, you don't want to wake up at 8 a.m. and go to this job. Yeah, you don't. But listen, like, how many more months of this until you can quit? You're like, okay, if I could do this maybe 2 more months. Okay, so 2 more months, you'll wake up. Like 2 more months and then this is done. Like, do you understand? Like, when you view it that way, where there is some type of end goal, then you don't feel so crushed, you know? I feel like when you don't set a goal of a timeline, then you just feel like you're just on this wheel and it doesn't feel like it's gonna end. But if you give yourself like, yo, like, you have 3 more, if it's 4 more, if it's a year, whatever it is, if you have a target, you can count down. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have a target and you feel like you're stuck, it's very simple. If you're like, I'm doing this for a year to make enough money for a year, then I quit. Okay, then month 1, you're like, yo, 11 more months, bro. Like 10 more months. Like, then your motivation is just like, it's a countdown. You're not just doing it to kind of be like, one day I want to quit. It's like, no, I'm gonna quit, and this is when. Yeah. You know? So when I made that decision to quit, what I did, which is pretty funny, is I booked a trip to LA. So it was All-Star Weekend. This was 2 years ago, 2018. All-Star Weekend was in LA. And I was like, okay, when I made my mind up to quit, it was like October, right, of 2017. So All-Star Weekend is in LA in February 2018, okay? So I'm like, okay, I want to be in LA for All-Star Weekend. I also want to be a free man by All-Star Weekend. I don't want to have to worry about coming back to work. This will be my target, you know? And at that time, I've never been to LA at the time. Now I've been to LA a million times. But at that time, that was my first time. So I'm like, I want to go to LA. I want to be All-Star Weekend. And I also know my work will not let me take this time off. Okay? So I'm like, you're going to book this trip. You're going to pay for this trip. It's like, because you will be forced to make this decision whether you want to back out or not. When February comes, you're either going to say to your boss and be a bitch about it and be like, hey, I got this ticket. Can you let me go? And your boss is going to say no, because she's going to say no. And you're either going to say, okay, I'm going to go anyways, or you're going to say, you're going to quit before then and not have to even have a conversation. But the trip is booked. You're not going to LA.
Yeah.
It's either going to be a tough conversation with your boss, or you're like, oh, I can't go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm still going. Or you book that trip and you calmly quit prior to that, so that when you leave, you're like, you know. So I took the latter, and once I booked that trip, my mind was made, and I'm like, okay, I'm giving my 2 weeks. So I give my 2 weeks in December. I helped them roll over to the new year because I didn't want to leave them at the year end. Yeah. And I left at the end of January that next year, and I was in LA the next month, and I haven't looked back since. But I was like, I had to force myself to leave by creating like a concise and concrete target, you know?
That's important. That's important.
It is. It is. So it's like we cut corners with ourselves all the time, but we like to hold everybody else accountable.
Yeah.
You know? You'd be like, oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's important for people when they're making that transition to know that it's not an easy road. I just had a Buju track in my mind because I swear that's a Buju track, but it, like we just pulled up the track. You need to know that because there's this false idea that it's really smooth, you know, but that's for people who come from money. Like that's not the reality of the situations and the circumstances that so many of us come from, you know. I'm going to switch gears a little bit if that's okay. And I have a few questions to ask about the corporate world and kind of what your thoughts are on having to jump through corporate pillars to become and remain relevant. And it's something that I've noticed in places where the kind of overall culture is quite new. You don't really get that so much in London because there's a long history of grassroots organizing. So people are more kind of open to organizing on the ground and giving people an opportunity, even if you're not really somebody.
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot that that's not the case elsewhere. And so I'm just wondering on what your thoughts are on having to jump through these pillars, and are people willing to work with people and creatives that may not have worked with popular brands? Do we offer them the same opportunities based on the merit of their work alone?
So I'm a big preacher of your work doesn't actually matter. And that may sound contradicting, because I'm continuously working on my work, but your work doesn't actually matter. It's you, right? People buy into you. People buy into me, right? I'm not the best photographer in the world. I'm not the best photographer maybe in the city. I might be one of them, sure, but I'm not the best. And people aren't booking with me because I'm the best photographer. Right? They're buying into me. So especially in this climate where it's like there's so many of everything, like every field is saturated. Like people say, oh, that's saturated, that's everything's saturated. There's nothing that's not done. Like so when people give you that, oh, like don't do that, it's saturated, don't do that, I'm like, everything's saturated. Do what you're good at and what you enjoy, and you will find a way to make it work. I don't want to hear it's saturated, because everything is saturated. There's nothing untouched.
Yeah.
So like when people try and like knock down your ideas by saying like, oh, like there's a lot of money in that, there's money everywhere. There's everything is saturated. So people buy into you, right? And I'm glad I'm a living example of that, because I've only been doing this for 2 years full time, and I've been able to surpass a lot of different people in the city. I've been able to travel the world in Paris and London and Barbados, and done all these things that other photographers in Toronto are still in Toronto. Why? Not because I'm the best, because I'm not. I can admit I am not the best photographer. I have no problem saying that, because I don't care about that. No, but like I don't care about that. Like I'm not doing this to be the best photographer. I want to be great and improve every day. That's a given. But I'm not working what I'm working on to be the best photographer. I'm trying to make a difference, right? And when you make a difference, and when you can create a brand behind you, when you can have people that support you much bigger than your work won't even matter. People will buy into you. I'm a Black male going in white rooms and speaking in front of white people that don't know anything about Black stuff. And I'm doing that because they're like, I heard about this guy. I was referred about this guy. Like, I didn't put myself in that room. Someone put me in there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because realistically, I can't put myself in that room. That's just what it is. Like, unfortunately, but that's just what it is. So what I have to do is I have to build my brand around myself outside of my work, where my skin color, my work, all that superficial shit doesn't matter, because someone's buying into what I am creating, what I am building, right? So I feel like the loopholes and the corporate environment you have to jump through and all that kind of stuff is all irrelevant, because if someone buys into you, then the color doesn't matter in that aspect, right? But where we're restricted is we can't get in those rooms ourselves, and that's the difficult part. The rooms and the people I'm meeting, I'm getting there because a white person or someone they know or whatever referred me there, and now they need that cosign to bring me there. Sure, whatever. I'm in the room. But once I'm in that room, I'll make a difference and I will get that client, right? But it's that gap. Why can't I get to that room myself? How come if I send an email or reach out to somebody and they're like, I'll let you know, versus like, oh, no, like I worked with him before. He's really dope. Is he? Yeah. They talk to me. Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
It's like, but why did you need someone else to reiterate what I've been trying to direct to you directly? So I think that is the gap that we're trying to close, but I don't think the gap exists just like period. Like I don't think we can't get in those rooms. I just think our route is just more indirect.
Yeah. But I mean, on kind of a little bit of a different note, we can't lie and say that when people don't post, oh my goodness, like I got this like cosign or whatever with TD Bank, and then everybody's just like, oh shit. It's like, we actually don't care. Like, do we really care about Scotiabank? Like, let's be honest. Let's be real about that. We don't, right? But when someone says, oh, I got this partnership with Scotiabank, all of a sudden that means something that has value. But we know, like, as a cultural community, that doesn't actually have value. So I'm just interested in kind of what kinds of value judgments we make and what we consider valuable, and why that is so deeply intertwined with how we elevate people culturally within the community, and not just within within the Black community, just within the creative community in general, you know? Someone's work could slap prior to that, but all of a sudden now they have a partnership with the body shop, and we're like, oh shit, they must really slap. But like,
so that's yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking
that's
about.
not fair. That's not fair, because so many people don't have the access that we need to let go of that.
Listen, I see it every day, 100%. I think that comes down to our deeply rooted issues with wanting to be accepted by white people.
Preach.
Right? Like, we just, like, an easy, like, the easiest parallel I can give you is if there's a white company that we all know about, starts working with a Black guy, we're praising him, right? We're like, this guy is amazing, he made it. Yo, sick. He's working with, I worked at Air Canada before. People are like, oh my God, I work at Air Canada. I'm like, you guys don't give a fuck about Air Canada. You even know who owns it? Like, but it looks cool, right? But then I might be co-signed with, not as big, but a Black-owned company or a Black-run organization that now brings me on as their CEO, let's say. I might have a bigger position. I might even have a bigger position in a Black-owned company. I might even be getting paid more in a Black-owned company, but you don't know about it, so there's no likes on that. There's no comments on that, because I don't know what that company is. You check it out, you might look at it, I don't know, but cool, good job, right? But all I did was shoot a low-level campaign for a big white airline, and I'm being praised, right? So that is an easy parallel, and it really just comes down to the acceptance. We want to be accepted so bad, but the thing is, we don't want to be accepted by our own, or like we don't even consider it a thing when our own people are like, yeah, like, you're good. It's like, yeah, but that's coming from you. Like,
yeah,
they are. You mean? I'm supporting what you do as a Black person. What?
I vibe with this so hard. I'm doing this currently.
You're doing what? You're doing what?
So, like, I keep a job with KT Tape, which is a national brand, right? I absolutely firmly believe in the product. Otherwise, I personally wouldn't be there. But just me associating myself to this brand is my cosign in a door. You know what I'm saying? If I didn't enter conversations as a physio, like, oh, I work for KT Tape, I travel with KT Tape, is that what puts food on my table? Maybe not really. You know, great opportunity to travel and things like that. But it's the cosign. Being a female, being attractive in the sports world, it's hard to be taken legitimately unless you have a name, unless you have a cosign that precedes, you know, all of those demographical things that keep me steps further back.
Yeah.
And so, like, I am absolutely doing all of this.
Would you say that people who jump through those hoops are sellouts?
You're asking me?
That's kind of
just a little bit of the devil's advocate question. Like, I'm interested, because we're at a point now where we're like, yo, fuck those corporations, but low key, they have the money. High key, they have the money. So I'm just interested in how we wrestle with what we would consider these internal tensions, yeah? And how we're able to, because if we're thinking about change and we're thinking about how we can create movement and frequency within our community, we have to take from capital to create systems that work alongside of them. The idea that we can all of a sudden become the Black community and we're a part of this, like, is a bit, it's a stretch a bit, let's be honest, because of just the way that the whole system has worked. And so I'm just interested in, when you see someone that's posting things online and they're working alongside all these white brands, like, or these high corporations, not even white brands, but these wealthy corporations, like, do we look at them and we're like, you're kind of sold out?
I have a question for you then.
Okay.
What is a sellout?
I don't know.
That's the question.
And this is the question, but I hear this posed a lot where people kind of, a little bit of your validity is put into question.
Validity of what?
I don't know. Yeah,
but that's what I'm asking you. How can you not know? Not blaming you, but I'm saying, like, if you ask anybody, like, what is this? When someone's like, "Yo, you're a sellout," what is that though to you?
Yeah,
to somebody. And what I think it is, because I don't call people sellouts, but what I believe they are saying is the same conversation you and I and Steph had a couple days ago, where people are saying that, like, what looks black or what is black.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, oh, you're a sellout because you're working with white brands, but that very same person calling you a sellout has a day job for a white company.
Yes, right.
So I'm like, I'm a sellout only because I'm now working with a white company at a higher level. Like I'm just trying to figure out, like, what am I only not a sellout if have an entry level position with the white people? Like, when did I become a sellout? When I made more money with the white people? Or like, you're not a sellout because you're only entry level and you're making minimum wage for a white person, so you're not a sellout. But you're calling me a sellout because I have more money in a better position with white people. Like, I'm just trying to figure out when I became a sellout and when
these happen.
No, I know they happen. I'm really trying to figure out, like, where do you not become a sellout and I become the sellout? Like, because I'm more successful with white people, or because I was able to overcome adversity and racism and still be successful with white people, that made me the sellout? Like, I don't actually understand. So for me, I'm like, calling somebody a sellout and even, like, that whole term is just their own inadequacy of themselves.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, you're a sellout. It's like, no, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
You're not, and that's
sell
fine.
Out to what? And sell out to what?
To what? To you? Like, are you the now all hearing black community? Like, I'm just kind of, you know what I'm saying? So it's like that term, and again, these terms come from us, bro. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, we are the ones that keep creating this divisiveness within ourselves, and then like pointing and shaming and whatever our own people. And it's like, no, like, why aren't we like, yo, that guy got in with, in Microsoft, a high level, the only black guy in there. Like, why aren't we, like, collectively with this guy? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, nah, he jumped into Microsoft. It's like, you use Microsoft products every day. Like, he just got a job with this. Like, why is he a seller? Because he's integrated. Like,
and like, Steph made a comment about that the other day. Steph made a comment about that when we were talking the other day about us breaking open these boundaries of what it means. Do you know what I mean? And it's a bit of this, like we were saying in our last Zoom, it's a bit of this martyrdom idea that, like, that all of a sudden we have everything we do has to be like in you get where I'm going with this? Like, that we almost have to feel bad.
Right.
We're this self-loathing. We're beating ourselves because all of a sudden we have things. But on the contrary, I would also say that we need to be okay with the idea of black mediocrity. That not everything needs to be black. This idea of black excellence. That it's okay for us to be just average and regular, and people can just exist within their world, within where they are, and that be okay.
Yeah.
100.
And if people don't want to be at the top of, that's all right. They're not less of anything, you know?
Nope.
Evan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Chris Rock has a really good joke about exactly what you're saying. No, he does. He's like, equality is literally, it's like when a black person can make a Sharknado 5 movie and it's trash, and we're not saying, oh, it's a black guy, and we're being like, why would you do that? Why would you make this shitty movie? It's kind of like, nah, you made a shitty movie, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be excellent. It's just shit. And we can say it's shit and move on. And it's not because you're black. It's just, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back to this sellout thing. First of all, Kat and Ryan, you guys are preaching gospel to me. I can't tell you how much I love that you introduced that energy into the room right now, because the concept of selling out moves at odds with the concept of selling. Like, selling ties to leverage. What we're asking for as a black community right now is leverage at a bare minimum. So there's this grave irony when we start introducing like critique around how we're getting leverage. To begin, we need leverage. Like, we're not on equal playing fields with anything. And the ultimate leverage is commercial. Like, we need financial backing. We can't just have dreams materialize out of pure ambition and will and passion. Like, we need capital. So like, selling out can't stand in the way of us thinking something is good or excellent or good for the community. It has to work in conjunction with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Has anybody watched Self-Made on Netflix yet?
No.
With the, what's her name? Oh, and
Madam C.J. Walker.
Care product.
Madam C.J. Walker, the first woman millionaire.
There you go.
In America. You should watch it. Stefan, what you're saying is she does the damn thing. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, you have to, because you partner with white-owned business does not make you a sellout. You have to create your own thing, simultaneously partnering with other existing things that are around that could elevate you as well, and also feeding back into the things that you want to build, and keeping those people in mind. Do you know, like, if you were someone who wanted to be like OJ and like denounce that, like, that is the idea where you want to be a part of that, rather than like what Ryan's talking about, like building something for yourself. It's different. Do you know what I mean? And you're just conscious of that. Like, I know what I'm doing and I know where I want to go and I know the people I want to help, rather than it's like, I have this dreamland I've created where like, I don't want to be this thing anymore and I have to go do it on my own.
Well, what's crazy is that it's almost hypocritical.
Oh, gotcha.
Because you're
definitely,
we're in the same breath, we're complaining that we're not in these rooms.
100%.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, we're complaining that we're not in these rooms, and then when we get in these rooms, we're a sellout. So it's like, wouldn't you want us to be in these rooms so that we can try to get more of us into those rooms? Like, because white people are not going to bring us in this room. So would you not want a black person in this room to at least he or she tries to get us in that room as well? So there's 2 of us or 3 of us or 4. Like, how else are we going to get in that room? So I don't. It's to be like, oh, we don't get the jobs. We're not in these rooms, and then when we get in the room, we're like, oh, but he's a sellout. It's like, how do you, like, in your mind, are you conceptualizing like 30 black people just walk into a corporation and take over a floor? Like, how do you think, like how do you think this actually happens?
Yeah.
You don't just take over a company and now we are in this company. Like, we have to integrate, we have to infiltrate, we have to come in somehow through their methods, whatever that may be. I don't care how you got there. If you're in there, I don't care. Like, why does that matter?
But on the flip side, we do have the idea that having 10 of us in a room will necessarily change the tone of the room. And that is also not a truism. It's the same idea of having 10 black cops. That doesn't create reform within the police system. So we also do need to kind of hold on to the ideas that representation is not reform. And that's an important thing to think about as well. That although we tick off these diversity and inclusion checkboxes, that's the first step of the process, but then comes the process of actually like creating structural change within these spaces. And I think that's also an important thing to mention. So we're not emotionally kind of distraught when we go into these places, and there's so much to untangle because white supremacy has really kind of placed its tentacles in all of these different spaces in a very deep way.
Yeah.
And so I don't want us to be disheartened when we go into these spaces and they're not what what we think they're supposed to feel and look like, because that happens to a lot of people, and you become discouraged, and then people quit, and it's not their fault, you know.
Kat, I love that you're keeping us in check in real time right now. I just want to add a sticky note to your thought board and say that I'm really tired, and Ryan has been speaking about this in so many words. I'm really tired of unrooted critique. Like, the Black community is so good at unrooted critique. It's just being mad at things, just for the sake of expending energy. Like, make sure that your critique, especially of other Black professionals, creatives, operators, that it's moored into something that's building us up and inspiring us and empowering us, and not just critique for the sake of critique. Don't just be heard. Don't add noise. We have enough noise around us. We're getting noise with our own sort of covert and overt oppressions from white supremacy. Don't just add more noise to the room. We need signals. We need people who are trying to get us to destinations, places that allow us to have foundation. Like, don't just throw more critique in the room.
That
part. Great stuff. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about stuff when you say the noise. Think about those internalized conversations that people are having. And, we think a lot about, and we talk a lot about bringing up children and inspiring them. And we've got these mantras that we have children repeat constantly about how capable they are and how smart they are. And then, you want to compare it to how people in the community are reacting. So they're going their whole life thinking that they're going to have to put in this work, and they do put in the work, and they earn a spot, and they make it to the top. And then what? And then they're told by their community that they're selling out for doing exactly what their mother's been telling them to do since day one, since really the community has been telling them to do since day one. That's a difficult internal conversation. And I think the mental health surrounding that is also something that we remiss if we didn't mention.
Preach. Ryan, Kat, and I were speaking about this when we were catching up. We're just talking about like Black snowboarders and Black anime fans and like Black campers. Like, look at how we react to that in our community. They're like disengaged, put aside, not glorified or exalted in a way that an athlete or a rapper is. Like, think about those people who are trying to create bridges and borders for us. That's the energy, that's the opposite energy of what they need to actually start opening doors for us, to get into organizations, as Ryan was saying. Like, we need people to be like, break open this concept of Blackness and start standing behind people and not in front of them.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like Stockholmy, right? Where you just kind of like develop this syndrome and you're reflexively anti-Blackness, and Nadia is exactly right, where it's this part of your identity that even though you are Black, you have to also identify anti-Blackness in your own language and in your own mental headspace, and really solidify your identity. Just by phenotypic presence, I walk this line of like, not being this enough, not being that enough, not being the other enough. So I think that I'm just naturally know that critique is going to happen anyway. So I don't feel affronted by it. But I will say that beyond mentally, physiologically, it hits too, man. Like when all of it, and you're just like doing the prescribed hustle, gotta hustle harder, always it.
We've sabotaged this conversation, forgive us.
Big point. Lit. No, these are some really interesting points. And I'm really glad that we're talking about them, because I think that they get to the heart of what we often find challenging to wrestle with on our own, which goes back to Ryan's point of the fact that his point on how important it is for us to work together to get to these answers. Like, we come from such different experiences and backgrounds, and I say this all the time, but the importance and the relevance of having a global community is so crucial. And again, for anybody who's joining at the moment, like, because I feel like I see people dipping in and out, but just thank you to everybody, just as a little bit of a gratitude moment. Yes. I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit, and I want to go back to the idea of creativity. And this is going to be directed at you, Ryan, but anybody else that feels they want to chime in, please do so. The idea that creativity and creation is hardly instantaneous. It's nothing like you don't switch on a light bulb and then all of a sudden you become creative. It's a gradual kind of synthesis of experiences, isn't it? Of thoughts, of ideas, of observations. And we are a product of the things that we see, the things that we hear, and the things that we absorb. And so for you, Ryan, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions of how people can consistently produce creative work. One day you wake up and all of a sudden you decide, oh my God, I want to be a chef. Okay, well, how do you do this? And how do you turn up on a day-to-day basis and do this consistently over time?
I don't think there's a blanket answer for that. I think, we also have to dissect the word creativity, because there's so many layers to the word creativity. Like my creativity, making videos and writing and in photography is completely different than a hairdresser's creativity,
Yeah.
right? Or a dancer or anybody else or any type of art, you know? So I don't think it's a blanket answer of how do you, you know, continue to be creative. I think it comes down to you. If you find, like, as cliche as it may sound, but once you find your purpose in your creativity, I feel like you continue to operate at that frequency.
Okay.
And whatever that may be for you, like if you're, I'll just use the examples I gave you. If you're a hairdresser and you found your purpose that, like, you're going to be the one to make the most protective hairstyles in the city, that is going to be your thing. Your creativity will continue to spark in that frequency, in that area. You'll be looking at things, you'll be watching people, you'll be watching TV, and anything that you do will be operating at that frequency to you know, I guess, give you energy for your creativity in that avenue. So like you start viewing everything in a particular lens, you know. For me, I can give my own example. Like, once I found my purpose and like what I want to create, like, there's photographers that just, like, not to knock anybody, but there's photographers that just shoot the CN Tower every day, and that's just what they post. Like, you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Photographers just posting CN Towers every day. It's CN Towers and street stuff, and they're posting what's popular. People, I'm not sure how, but you're still not tired of seeing the CN Tower. Sure, right? Whatever. You probably haven't seen the CN Tower on my page for years. Like, I don't post.
Love the CN Tower.
Like, I get it. I see it. It's there.
Yeah.
But once you find your purpose, and me finding my purpose is that I want to create things in any area. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm shooting a wedding or I'm shooting a documentary. Like, I want to create things to make people feel something, right? So at the baseline of all of my work, I want people to feel something. I'll never just put something out there that someone's like, I don't know what this is supposed to do. like no one will ever look at my stuff and be like, why do you do that? You know?
Yeah.
You might not know my exact reason, but you will take something from it in your own way, right? Yeah. If you want to find out my exact reason, you'd have to ask me, but I know that when I create something, I'm creating it with the ability to have multiple interpretations, right? And that's always something driven in my work when I create something. So with that being my purpose, it now has structured my lens and my frequency in anything I do. When I'm talking with somebody, when I'm getting dressed, when I'm watching a movie, like, I can't even watch movies anymore. I love watching movies, but I can't even watch movies anymore without listening to the music that they decided to use.
Yeah.
Without, you know, seeing how they shot an angle, without, you know, seeing the continuity. Like, one clip they have a cup or a bottle, the next clip their hands here without. I'm just like, what? Like, I'm always viewing things in ways I would create it, or in ways I would see it, or how I would view it, how I interpret it, right? Yeah. And I think that only comes once you find your purpose on what you are trying to create. Because I don't need to be inspired by anybody. You know what I mean? I don't like, my whole lens has been conditioned to my purpose and to my frequency. Everything I do now, right? Yeah. So when people ask me, like, yo, how do you come up with stuff? I'm like, I'm not coming up with stuff. It is part of what I create now. Yeah. You know, the videos that I've been posting lately with the Black issues that we're dealing with, that wasn't part of a plan. I didn't 4 months ago, I didn't have a plan to roll out 3 videos about my Black experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like in June, I'm going to post 3 videos about being Black. Like, no, like, that wasn't it. You know what I'm saying? So but it came because I consumed, I saw what was going on, I processed it, and I said, how can you formulate a way to illustrate or communicate how you feel about this? Yeah. So I'm just going to plug the team real quick and just say that you did exactly what this series is, and you embodied the experience. So shout out to Eternal Remedy. Hey, Mark, come through. That
That was right on time, because that was the only word that was not going through anybody else's mind. I was just like, are you embodying this?
But yeah, that's exactly right. So, but it wasn't a forced creativity. It wasn't like I'm sitting here like, what should I do? Like that. Those are when the worst things happen. When someone's like, I need to be creative. I need to make something. It's like, no, you don't need to make something. You make something when it makes sense. When the time is for it. It's the people that force stuff out just so they're relevant, just so they're seen, that create bad things. You know? So unfortunately, like I made the first video, I didn't even plan to make a second one. But unfortunately, 3 days later, another person died. And I'm like, I feel like I have to talk about this. Like, so another video came, but I didn't make that first video as if I'm gonna make a sequel. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't structured like that.
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question, like the creativity comes from operating at a frequency, but once you find your purpose, then I feel like it doesn't become a challenge. It becomes embodied, as you want to use it, as you want to say.
First of all, let me quickly plug Ryan's videos because they're fire, very nuanced, very thoughtful, very relevant. And for anyone within and outside of the Black community, watch those.
Watch.
How can we them? And where are they located?
They're on my Instagram and my IGTV. I have a playlist on my IGTV called Black, #Black. So in that playlist, there's a couple live videos, but there's 3 specific videos I made. The first one's called What's It Like Being Black? The second one's called Black and White. And the third one is Stop Messaging Black People. So
but we're jumping the plug right now, like we're going against hood ethics. You know what I mean?
Middleman, right? I don't want to be no. So you keep saying something, right, that like hits me, and like you keep saying like, oh, once I found my purpose. And I think that's what people are like looking for, right? You're trying to find this rub. We're all, like North Americans are so persistent on some sort of like ready-made culture, right? Like, okay, well, come on, man, tell me, what's the thing, yo? What do I gotta do? Do I like salt bath? Do I cryotherapy? If I foam roll, is it gonna hit me then? Like in my profession, that's the stuff that people do to me all the time. They're like, oh, but what about this new diet? And are you doing this? Are you up on that? And where are you at? Oh, let me just pick your brain, right? And I think that obviously as an athlete, you have like goal setting naturally. It's funny because like me, I've always been a freelancer, like, and I've only dabbled in corporate environments, but I come by that naturally because I'm first generation American, and my parents have owned a business my whole entire life. I don't know what it's like to see somebody in a corporate environment and make life work.
Keep going. So, I'm just changing my battery. Keep going.
Yeah, no worries. So like I notice in you that you're embodied, like you come like you're already embodying this purpose. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that are lost along the way, where they feel like down. I know as an athlete, like my only mentality that I will permit myself to function on is super, super high.
Right.
I got it going, and it's only like in injury when life stops me that I do take time and I find myself being creative or allowing myself the mental headspace to be creative, because we're all quarantined. It's appropriate and universal for me to be at home typing on the computer. Otherwise, I wouldn't afford myself the time because I should be out making money, because there's always more that I could do, more that I could have, and somebody else that I could help. You know what I'm saying? Like I could always be doing more. I feel that's such a part of my Black identity is like this hustle. There's this Living Color skit where they talk about you only have one job. Is one job you have?
I've definitely seen that skit.
And it's the thing that I do my whole life. my whole life. I have so many jobs. And it just comes out, you know, you just pick up this one, and that's the hustle that like I'm so grateful for. You know, I have to in the reverse learn to not burn the candle at both ends, and how do I be compassionate to myself so that I can afford this compassion to others.
Right.
Can I just say something real quick just about the idea of purpose? And that purpose is often something that you come into and you grow into and you grow through and toward and with. That it's a parallel experience. And that as we learn and unlearn, that your purpose shifts with you. So it's not necessarily always, and the idea of having a goal is important, but allow that goal to have a little bit of fluidity. And it's okay if you have to change your goal, and it's okay if your goal changes with you. And I think that that's also an important thing to realize, that maybe doesn't work alongside the idea of a brand, that the brand is meant to be something consistent and marketable, but we're allowed, because as humans, we're abstract beings. And so that thing can change as well. So I think sometimes we need to offer ourselves a little bit of a room to expand, and room to make mistakes, and room to grow as well, you know. And we're a bit hard on ourselves sometimes, I think. But just on the idea of purpose, I just wanted to say that bit.
No, I think you bring up really good points about that. And someone who works in a culture that often talks about purpose, I think a lot of people have struggled with even the idea of like finding like a target or finding something to work towards. The idea of purpose, I think we make it to be this grand scheme that like my life's work has to build towards, when it's the simplest thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like Ryan touched on this. He's like, you wake up one day and you see something happens, and like my purpose today is just to share my experience. Like it's that simple. And from there, it's like, what does creative process look like? It's a process. You're like, oh, how would I tell this story? And it's very simple. Like, it's not this grandeur thing that we're thinking about for 40 years, and this is my legacy. And I think what we're all getting to is that it's this small, minuscule thing that like, this is the thing I want to do with my life, or this is how I want to show up today. This is the kind of things that I want to bring to. And Kat was talking about like that flexibility. It's like, you're allowed to change. I'm allowed to change my mind every day. I can change in this moment, and I also allow other people to change as well. Just like brands, like even to have that rigidness of brands, it's like brands can change as well. Like, we have this idea that things can't change, they must stay the same, but that's not true. I'm changing every day. I'm learning every day. And I also include learning into being creative. Like, if the more you learn, the more you can synthesize those things into creative work. Anything you create is not new. Nothing is new. Everything that we've ever created is something that I've seen from over there, and I've created this new thing that I think would shed one more, like another color on to this masterpiece we call life. And I think the idea of purpose, anyone who's trying to find the purpose in this call, or calls to, or who watches this later on, is just very much like, I don't know, it's very simple. Just what gets you going, like what, just like, I don't know. It's very simple.
And we know the idea of the top doesn't necessarily exist in the way that it did, because the majority of us are 30 and close to 30 and don't own our own homes. So we've had to make adjustments within that model, because the idea was you're going to be 25 and 30 and be married and have kids and have a house. And within our generation, we've had to create a different idea of what it means to be at the top. Like, that doesn't have the same, kind of weight and depth as it did when our parents were here. But your thoughts on that, Ryan? What do you think?
I think to piggyback on the biggest point that I took from what Evan just said was, you're allowed to change every day. And I think that's the biggest difficulty people have acknowledging, especially from social pressures, right? And that's a big thing that I personally preach when I go to help and motivate people, is that like, I've changed a million times. Like, you're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to adjust. You're like, we get in this rut where you feel like what people have identified you as, or what people associate you with, is what you have to be. Right? And then we get stuck where it's like, well, how do I get out of that now? Because everyone's used to me doing this and everyone are expecting me to do this a certain way, or I've always been known to be an athlete. So then how can I just become something else? Like we do all this internal self-sabotaging, right? Mm-hmm. Where really it's like, if you want to change tomorrow, today, 100 times, you don't have to ask anyone permission to do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to run that by you that I'm doing, I'm acting now. I don't have to run that by you. I just start acting and I get better at that. And that's it. I don't need your approval or anyone to tell me that I'm allowed to start acting now because I'm a basketball player. I'm not supposed to act like, nah, like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's one of the biggest things that I hold on to and apply in my own life is that change, you're allowed to change. And especially with the creativity thing, like another big thing you said is like how they want to show up today, right? The biggest thing about creativity is that it is not a stagnant or quo of energy. It is not just, this is my creativity. This is how it, like every day it's like this. I do the same thing every day. I'm creative. So this is how I operate. It is not like that. Mm-hmm. So every day you have to be willing to open up to how you are going to consume and how you're going to exert creativity in like it's work each day. You know what I'm saying? It's self-work on yourself each day to be different and to acknowledge things different, to process things differently. Monday shouldn't feel like Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? We view these days of the week because it's like we're so autonomously doing certain things. And it wasn't until I quit my job where I realized that Monday isn't Tuesday. Like, no lie. I had to quit my job to really and a lot of us are in that, but I had to really quit my job to really realize that like Monday is not Tuesday and Tuesday is not Wednesday, because we get caught up in like back at it again tomorrow, and we give a shell of ourselves, the same shell of ourselves every single day. Yeah. And that limits our own creativity, that limits our mental health, that limits a whole bunch of things, because we give the same shell of ourselves every single day into the weekend, and a lot of people are living like that. So when I quit my job is when I really was like, yo, Sunday's a different day. Like Monday is like a different day. Thursday is like, this is a Thursday. Like, I don't like, they're all different. We have to do things differently. And there's still a way to find that while working a day job, right? It may be more difficult because of the autonomous work and like the schedule and so on and so forth, but you have to find a way to make the day feel different, right? You have to find a way to show up to work differently. Okay, you might be doing the same job every day, but what are you going to do different today to make this day different? Don't allow yourself to just drag a shell to work and do the same stuff every day. Right? Yeah. Okay, this method you've been doing for the last 2 weeks. Okay, in the next week, try a new method. Like, find a way to make your day job different until you're at a stage where, okay, you can work for yourself if that's something you want. But if you allow yourself to stay in this continuous cycle of the same shell and showing up the same way every day, you will continuously limit yourself and will be in these same situations.
I appreciate that. And no, that's a huge point. Yeah. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with. So including myself. So I'm really grateful that you brought that point forward. I'm going to just interject and do a time check, if that's okay. And just kind of, because I know Steph, there was something, Steph's text was expanding on screen. So I just wanted to, but maybe I'll let Steph, you do the time check.
You've done the most graceful time check I've ever seen in these sessions. So yeah, we've been at this for now an hour and 20 minutes. So I just want to make it safe for people to bow out gracefully, just in case you're feeling awkward. But we will continue for as long as Ryan can accommodate, for as long as Kat wants to continue hosting. I'm stuck in right now. I feel like this has been incredibly enriching and elevating, and want to continue on. But for those of you who are like, yo, I've been in this for a minute, please feel free to bow out. But on this thought, because I think this is another integral point of the conversation, is just thinking about how important that is form or mode of Black activism. The idea that Evan introduced and Ryan founded through his life and his story, just like coming to terms with the fact that you are a subject. You are an individual agent that chooses and engages in the world in the way that you want to and applies your perspective on the day-to-day basis. Because racism is exactly the opposite of that. It's to say that you aren't this agent that chooses and has free will. You are an object of my desire, my imagination, and my oppression. And so real activism comes with Ryan saying, I no longer want to work in this way, in the way that I've been prescribed, and I want to create and mold the world in the way that I want to show up. Like that's, if I see someone who has his color skin and I have this color skin and I've been wrestling with that within myself for a period of time, that little bit of degree of energy and inspiration could push me over the line. And then it becomes this continuous cyclic thing of us empowering ourselves. And so I just want to highlight that this is real Black protest. This is real Black activism right here, because it's literally showing that we're subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, did someone want to say something? Were you about to say something, Evan?
Nah, you're touching on things that really highlight the idea of white supremacy in itself. It's very much like, if you are in a majority, you see yourself as an individual, and anyone outside of that is subjected to, like what you're saying, is the group, because you don't know a lot about that group. So anyone you meet, you apply this bias to all of them. And we are trying to, at least for ourselves, internally break ourselves from our own mold that we are creating and expand what we can be, because we've even bought into the idea of what we are limited to. And I think it's a shame that some of us even hold ourselves down. Like you know, things that you're interested in. Just to bring it back to, I just remember when I first started at Lulu and just not feeling like totally comfortable, like I wanted to be there because of the entire, like the idea of the brand, and like feeling like, what's it called? Like a DNI hire. It's like, I'm here because they need someone who looks like me, not because people who look like me are here. I looked at like Nike around the corner. I'm like, oh, you know what? I would have rather like worked in Nike head office or like Adidas, because then I can do these things. They are far more in that D&I space, but can't be here because of just like the global brand and like how people I would even have conversations with, like, think about it. And I felt that internally, and that internal thought like held me down. And I'm really grateful that we've had these conversations, because we're expanding the idea of what we can be in the spaces we can be in.
Evan, are you aware of the Reddit co-founder situation?
Yeah.
So I had mixed emotions about that, but I've since concluded that it is a positive thing. My mixed emotions were, I'm not sure if you guys know about the situation, but the co-founder of Reddit, he recently stepped down from his position. He's actually also Serena Williams' husband. So he's a white guy. Obviously, Serena's Black. And they have a Black child together.
Wait, he's the co-founder? I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah, so he's the co-founder of Reddit. So he's a white guy. He's with Serena Williams. They have a Black kid together. And he recently made a statement saying he's stepping down as co-founder of Reddit, and he's demanding that position is filled with a person of color, right? That is his way, he believes, of taking a stand. And he said he felt he needed to do this because he didn't want his daughter to grow up and ask him, when all this stuff was going on, what did you do, Dad? You know? And he didn't want to not be able to tell his daughter how he made a difference, or how he tried at least to make a difference during this time. So I had mixed emotions at first, because I was like, similar to what Evan's saying, it's like, when that Black person gets that role, it's like, am I only here because like I have to be here? Like, do I really deserve this job? Like, did I really get this because of my credentials? Or is it kind of like they need to fill, like, there's all those thoughts, right? But I've since reevaluated my thinking, and I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's gonna come regardless. But I kind of feel that way in regular jobs, right? So like, like it doesn't actually change that feeling. Whether you work to it or not, I still feel like, did they still hire me because I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like we actually can't get rid of that.
Right? Like if you're the token, you're just the token person in the
What?
room. If you're the tokenism of it, like you're just that. It's just that. I am the token person, you know,
Right.
like whether it's metaphorical, physical, actual, mental, like
Exactly. So because of that, I'm like that feeling actually isn't gonna change. So
never.
regardless, like that's a good thing. If his way is like, I'm gonna demand someone is in this specific role, way at the top, that has to be a person of color. That feeling of like, do I belong there we're gonna feel that in any position. So I don't care about that anymore. I used to, and I'm like, that actually gonna exist regardless. So the positive of it is at least we are there, and that feeling comes with just the territory of being Black. So overall, having a Black person in that position is a positive thing, because we can't take away from that position. We can't take away from the person being in that position because they are there, and there's nothing more he can do. Like he's white. He knows he has privilege. He's like, I know the only way for you to get here is by me doing this, right? He's acknowledged all that. So it's like, there's actually nothing more he can do. And we, as a Black community, we like to complain, you know, because,
Yes.
and I caught myself complaining, because that's a complaint. I'm like, okay, so this white guy is in this position, he offers it to a Black guy or a Black woman. Okay, well, at least we're there. But like, it's like, nah, like we're there. Like we can't expect white people to change, but then critique the efforts that they're doing to help change, right?
And I think a little bit, to take it a little bit further, I think that is, it's problematic in that maybe not on the opposite end of tokenism, but alongside tokenism is also agency. And so when you say that someone's only there because they're Black, you're taking away their agency as well. Like, I belong here, and I'm here because I made not just be like, it's almost as though we're saying that person had all the power in the decision to making, to allowing us to be in that space, where all of us nothing to
be educated.
Listen, my credentials.
You still have to get your degree. You still have to work. Like, he didn't just pull a Black person off the street and say you're the CEO.
They didn't do the interview for me. I was in the room when the interview happened, and I spoke on behalf of myself, and I have agency, and we all have agency. And it goes back to what you were saying, Ryan. The phrase that we need to remember as we move through this cultural shift is, each and every single one of us belong here. Mm-hmm. And that is the agency that we need to remember to carry through these spaces. Tokenism, diversity, inclusion, all of that is bullshit, and that is their shit. That's not our shit. And we need to remember that we belong here regardless of these structures that they've created. You know what I mean? And regardless of color, this is a lot to do with class as well, right? So I think as long as we continue to carry ourselves into that space, remembering that we belong here, that's important. And Nadia, hey.
Hey. Honestly, I just showed up because you guys were on my topic, so my professional area of expertise, and speaking about boards and speaking about the influence of board seats and representation. The amount of Black investors in the corporate world is so incredibly slim, and the statistics, and we're seeing a lot of these articles come out lately, and I've been reading them and I've seen it myself. I've worked in investor relations, and it is a very white landscape. And even just the act of putting somebody Black on a board to ruffle feathers, to make decisions in the directions that really truly benefit people, from top down, that's so incredibly important. You know, we can name all these fancy titles and fancy roles, but at the end of the day, the influence that a board has on a company is the stronghold. The influence that the investors have on a company is a stronghold. So whether somebody's been put there as a token, or as you said, you know, out of their own, which of course they're put there out of their own experience, hard work, education, everything that they've gone through to get to that point, it's absolutely necessary to have that voice as a very start. And not only that, but then you're inspiring the next generation of people who are going to look up to that and say, I want to be that person. I want to make money doing that specific job. How do I do it? What are the steps to get there? You know, like we have to be we have to be really, I think, celebrating these people for what they've done and the kind of work that they're going to be doing, you know, despite someone else's opinion of why they're there. They earned it, right?
Yeah.
No, for sure. And I think about this a lot in the literary world and in journalism as a writer, and reading articles on Black food within the food world. And I scroll down and it's a white guy writing about it. And I'm sure a white guy could do all his research to write about Black food, but how much more beautiful would it be if it was a Black woman writing about rice and peas? Like if it was a Jamaican woman writing about rice and peas, because this is her cultural food. So it's the whole thing to say that someone else that's very knowledgeable on the topic could also do it, but how much more rich and how much more nuance and how much more depth would this thing have if it was written by the people who are the people to be telling the stories? Kind of like what you're saying, Nadia, is like the representation matters so much in that these stories would be so much more colorful and so much more bold if they're written by the people who deserve to be there. And that happens within my industry in the food world so much when we're not the tellers of the stories, and the language is telling of that. The language that's used doesn't do the justice of what the thing needs to be done, you know?
It's bland. It doesn't have flavor. It's so annoying. Oh my gosh, if I see another post about pale jerk or my Asian this and some fruit sauce and Caribbean that, what island is that from?
Yeah.
Are we gonna get into cultural appropriation? Is that what we're doing?
No, we can't. We can't.
No, please don't.
I can see him in it.
The food bit of it. The food bit of it. I just like.
Are we opening that? Are we
not opening the floodgate? We're not opening the floodgate.
Are we opening cultural appropriation because
the box closed?
Bruh.
That's for another conversation, another day. We're gonna beg Ryan for more time. Not right now. Not right now.
Man.
You know what? It's a question that's kind of been burning, and obviously, like we say this on every chat, but so many of us most of us are from Toronto, but we all have experienced and lived in a variety of cities around the world. And but I'm interested in your opinion, Ryan, of the current cultural climate in Toronto specifically. And I think as someone that I would, and I'm sure everybody would consider to be a pillar within the cultural community, what your opinion would be of what it is, what the tone is, what the feel is, and maybe what kind of power the understanding of this would have on people that are trying to navigate that cultural landscape. So I think you're better for it when you understand the groove of it a lot better. And I feel like Toronto is a bit of a new city in that way, and a lot of people are really struggling to find their place in it. Because the flavor of it is quite new. So do you have, and anybody else feel free to chime in, but it's been a question.
I think that Toronto is very segregated. As collective as it may come across and as multicultural as we are, we're extremely segregated. It's separated by class. There's definitely classism here, especially in the media entertainment industry. Things are definitely separated by who's popular, who's not, what someone can do for you, who can get you in a room, rather than necessarily your skill set. There's a lot of people that are trying to get put on in this city, right? Rather than create their own on, you know? There's just continuous drive. Like I guess like the easiest example to just make it pretty simple, there's this continuous drive to be Drake, right? Like, I'm being serious.
You think so? Yeah.
And I don't mean Drake as in...
Oh, I just want to plug that's really interesting that this is when Steph decided to return to the conversation. I feel like that's important to mention.
Yeah, we're back on Drake.
This is a theme. This is a consistent theme.
We're back on it.
And I'm not saying they want to be Drake as they want to be a rapper. I'm not saying they want to be Drake as they want to be, you know, a mixed race Jewish Black guy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the continuous drive to be Drake is the continuous drive to be a well-renowned Toronto success. Right? Like there's just a continuous drive to be a Toronto success. And that mentality that a lot of people have, especially in this city, that it's created envy towards Drake, which just doesn't make any sense, right? Like that is the prime example of what we're talking about as a community, where it's like Drake and now The Weeknd are two of the most popular people in the world, right? Both from Canada, both from the city, whatever. And instead of like, yes, there's a large portion of fans and whatever, fans will be fans, but you can clearly tell throughout this city, it is not a collective group of support that supports these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like you can feel it. Like they're gonna have their fans, but I know in Toronto, like you can feel it when you talk to someone, when you hear, Drake's all right. Like, listen, like we're at a point in this world where it's like there is decades and decades where no one even cared about Canada. No one even knew where Toronto was. You know what I'm saying? And now that, you know, we're NBA champions and we've done these things and we're on the map and we have these artists that are coming out and Bieber's and all this stuff's coming out of Toronto. Now people know Toronto, right? And when people think of Canada, they think Toronto. It's not Canada. It's Toronto, right? So if you're aware of that new climate that we're now in, even NBA players are coming from Toronto. We have Canadians in NBA from Toronto. So it's like so much is coming from the city now. You would think collectively we would support all those people that have now put this city on the radar. But instead, it's envy, right? Instead, it's why couldn't it be me? Instead, it's he's not that good. He's not that good. Instead, it's, you know, all these chinks in the armor people are looking for in the city, right? And it's disgusting. And it's and that is the reason why you hear story of like people, successful people from Toronto, they leave. Like this is not a secret. They leave. Like, and when they leave, they blow. Why does that happen?
Yeah.
Right? It happens here. And yes, it happens in other cities, but there's a lot of cities I can name in the States where those people blew up in their state and in their city and they stayed there.
Yeah.
Atlanta is probably the best example because Atlanta is a very Black city, right? And Atlanta loves their own. Like, I wish Toronto was like Atlanta. I wish Toronto was like, yo, let's push our Black people. Let's be like, yo, we are Atlanta. Like, we are Toronto. Like, I wish we were like that, but we're not. We're not. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate, but it's like, this is the reason why there's so many pockets in this city where it's like, there's the cool photographers, like the popular photographers. There's the athletes. There's certain groups where only certain athletes get invited to. There's certain clubs where only certain people get guest lists. You know, there's certain in every field. There's like this clique in our city. Rather than it being conducive and collective, we're very divided in this city, right? And unfortunately, when someone tries to break out of that mold, they get attacked, right? They get attacked, and then they're discouraged, and then they shut down, then they disappear, or they leave.
Yeah.
Right? So I personally, my personal experience, what?
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, my personal experience is like, I've been watching this, and I'm an observer, right? I just watch, I just see stuff, and I've personally gone against the grain my entire career. Like, you won't see me in these popular groups. You won't see me posting trends. You won't see me making, what Toronto people sound like video. I just don't do that shit. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, this is the stuff that is destroying us, and we glorify it. The six buzzes and all this nonsense and garbage in this city, we glorify it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
No, for sure.
My goal is to separate myself. Go ahead.
No, it's just because it's a bit delayed. So it's when I think that you might. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
To say that that I don't know if maybe it has to do with the already prescribed tone and feel of the city. And this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, having lived in London and New York and Toronto, is like, you go to New York and you know New York feels away. There's something that you're like, yo, this is New York. The same thing is like, you go to New Orleans, how are you not gonna eat food that's kind of representative of the Creole diaspora? How are you gonna be in London and be like, yo, London is this? Yeah. And so I think that lends to a certain level of creative freedom and expression, because maybe there are confines that we're working within. It's like, how are you going to talk about grime and not talk about Wiley? That doesn't make sense. Like, and so within these artistic expressions, there are cultural pillars. And I think if we don't acknowledge the forefathers and foremothers that have come before us within these cultural pillars, then we're a lost people. Like, how can we not think about the people who have come behind us that have paved the way, you know? And so I'm always thinking that within Toronto, I personally, maybe other people would disagree, but there wasn't a feel. I feel like the feel was, it's very sports related, very basketball related, because obviously basketball is hip hop, but there's not really a thing where you keep like, that's Toronto. There's lingo and there's language, but that's Afro-Caribbean. That's not Toronto.
You want to know why?
Yeah, I do.
Well, I mean, it's
tell us.
It's obviously just opinion, but I think we don't have any teeth in history in Toronto.
Yeah.
New York and all these places you're naming, they have their teeth in their history. There's the New York artists and the actors and all these people that come out of New York, they make ode to the people before them. They make ode to the Tupacs and all these people and the Biggies and blah, blah. They say, oh, this is, like, I got my flow from whatever. I got my inspiration from this and this and this. And like, people in Toronto don't give anyone their flowers. No, like, there's very rare that someone in Toronto that starts rapping today actually says, I started rapping because of Drake. I started rapping because of Cardinal. I started,
The flipping Underground Railroad ended in Nova Scotia. Why are we localizing our Black history and just saying that Blackness lives just within Toronto? The Black culture in Nova Scotia is massive. The Black radical movement in Nova Scotia is huge. So if we want to start thinking about Black history, we can't think that Black people don't exist before us within Canada. So I'm interested in us kind of opening up our arms and creating a more widespread and yeah. When you hear about,
but people don't. If I'm being honest, people do not care about other cities in Canada.
They don't.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
That's just what it is. Like, people do not care about other cities in Canada. There's people who never been to Vancouver. People who never been to out east. Like, they don't care. You know what I'm saying? I've been to both sides, so I've seen the experience. I've seen Nova Scotians. I've seen people in BC, whatever. And but not everyone has the luxury to travel, especially within Canada. And that's a Canada problem because it's expensive to fly within Canada.
Yeah.
It's more expensive.
There's a history, especially in places like, imagine that, the whole entire Underground Railroad ended.
But listen, if Canada really wanted people to explore Canada, flights should not be that expensive.
True. It's true.
They don't like Canada doesn't actually care about the Canadian expansion.
Yeah.
Because why is a flight to Miami cheaper than the flight to, Newfoundland?
Yeah.
Like, why, if I want to go check out New Brunswick, it's like $7. If I want to go to Miami, it's $3.50. Like, why can I fly to these states and to fly to Canada where there's nothing in New Brunswick? It's expensive, right?
Yeah.
The only people that fly to these cities are people that live there, right? Go ahead.
Because they're trying to keep the tourists out. You don't want the foreigners in your space. This is an unspoken white supremacy, right? And so when Jamaica was getting its independence, my father's side of the family went to Canada. And what I noticed of my Toronto-based family is that somehow this spectrum of racism is something that only exists on the other side of the border. Yet, as Kat's saying, the Underground Railroad stopped in Nova Scotia, right? But the outside of Toronto, your scope of people is the viewfinder. You know, you're not going to get very much culture outside of Toronto. Past Markham, no way. I was in BC 2 summers ago. The way that they look at you is searing. Once you leave Vancouver, bruh. And I only get like, I'm kind of safe because I'm tiny and Asian.
And there's a lot of Asians in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, she just slipped into Squamish, so it's okay. You know, they don't get like violent. But you see the whole thing come out in their face as they're examining you.
Yeah.
What is she doing here? Where does she come from? You know, and when I was in Toronto in 2016 visiting family, it was like, don't think this won't touch you. And my Toronto family is like, why are you like this? Because we were talking about the election, and they're joking about how like ignorant Americans are and how racist Americans are. And I'm like, don't think this won't hop over Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and come for you, you know? And so I think that we've all like personally embodied this latent activism, right? Like, Evan, I'm so inspired because you mentioned like feeling activated by my feed. And it's like, I'm just reposting shit that hits me. You know what I'm saying? And so these concepts hit for us, but they're so alien to the white demographic of people. Why aren't these things there? Because it doesn't even fucking exist in their minds.
Yep. It's true.
And that's humbling as fuck to realize I don't know shit about Black people, even though I said I'm not a racist person. That doesn't feel good. To exist amongst people and said, I don't feel any type of negative way, but also in the same vein, I haven't really given a shit either. To know that about yourself is angersome. And I think that's what you get reflexively from, like, I like to call them the Toronto kids. It's because you guys are all this mashup of colonialism, and no one will speak about it. But no one will speak about it because it makes white people uncomfortable. And I never understood that, because I always felt like if I had numbers the way that you guys have numbers in such diversity, that you would all come to an understanding. But instead, you just get the reflexive anger. And I think it's okay to feel that, because it does feel too little too late. You know what I mean? Like, I have white ally friends that I've definitely fucking groomed. I have one on here that I'm like, you know, taking along with me, and only because he out loud mentioned, I want to have these conversations. If not, I would have been absolutely resentful that this kid is ignorant as shit. Let him stay that way.
Yeah.
I just want to take a moment though to revisit something Kat said, and let's not get carried away and make this conversation about whiteness. Like, let's not centralize the conversation around white people. Like, this is Black empowerment. Like, we can't just always say that they're holding the keys to our world. Like, there's something about us coming together, banding together, being advocates for each other, putting people like Ryan on bigger platforms that is meaningful. Like, that's the work we need to do. That's their work. It sits elsewhere. It sits outside of the space. But us coming together and being like, here's what we're going to do in a very concrete, tangible way. Here's how we're going to show up for each other in the community, I think is a more meaningful conversation, because that gives us something in front of us, a goal to reach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think so what I'm gonna say, like, and just again doing another time check, but the majority of the conversations that we've had throughout the Embodied series, we've ended off with a few kind of strategic models, whether they're loose or strong models of how we can move forward. And I think they've been really important because a lot of the people that we've engaged with have come from a variety of different industries. So I'd be interested in kind of closing off on that note, if that feels comfortable for everybody. One of the questions I will ask though, and I'm gonna actually ask everybody that's a part of the ETRA team to just plug this. And I think as we're kind of transitioning out of the 2 weeks of, and Steph said something really lovely in the group today about that we've kind of had this cloud of gloom over us over the past couple weeks. And for some people, it might still be looming. Others, we're trying to find ways to come out of it. But I would be really grateful if each of us just plugged something really small in of how we've found joy in these moments over the past month. It doesn't have to be an expansive thing, but just a small thing of something that we can give to the community that are listening in, of ways that we as creatives, as entrepreneurs, and of people that are working, as broke people, whoever we are, of ways that we've been able to show up for ourselves in these moments. And then I'm going to end with one question for Ryan specifically before we close off, if that's okay. So if you don't mind, Evan, maybe I'll start with you, of maybe a way that you've been able to show up for yourself and how you've protected your mental health.
I have been speaking, and I haven't been just thinking of these things alone. I think prior to this, it's been something we joke about for or not even joke about, we're angry about for a couple of days, and then it dissolves and goes into my internal anger box, and then it stays there forever. But the past 2 weeks, I have become focused while also being connected with other people. And I've had more because of this, obviously this forum, and other ones. I've been able to just speak and just hear different opinions about experiences and just get to talk about these things. And it's been like my own version of therapy. And I found it really beneficial to me because it's also created a community. And I've met, the amount of people I've met and I feel close to through this is amazing. And I think in my silence, I've only created separation, and in my vocalization of just how I'm feeling has created connection. And that's been like a really big, I wouldn't say joyous moment, but I don't like that. It doesn't sound good. It's given me grace. It's given me like clarity. And yeah, I would say that. That was long-winded.
No, that's fine. Because, and I'm just going to say really quickly, because a part of this series is about us trying to explore how we show up more creatively and purposefully. And you can't show up creatively and purposefully and intentionally if you're not taking care of yourself. So I think that's the part that we need to make sure that we mention as well. But Mark, can I ask you next?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. And first and foremost, thanks, Kat, and thanks, Ryan, for a wonderful conversation. For me, how I've been able to maintain sanity in the last month with everything that's going on is I've always had this trick. Well, not always, but I found it in the last maybe 2 years. And it really works for me in dark and desperate times. So what I do is whenever I'm facing a crisis that is the cause of something outside myself, like I always ask myself, what can I do to make the situation worse? You know, like what can I do to actually make the situation as bad as it can possibly be? So for example, with the situation with George Floyd, I'd ask myself something like, what could I do to become the cop on George Floyd's neck? George Floyd's neck? And then I let myself experience those feelings, and I try to get into the mind of the cop. And then what I do after that is that I ask myself, what can I do to not become the cop that's on George Floyd's neck? And then I take it from there and I work on myself in that regard. And that helps me to stay grounded, and that gives me a sense of purpose and meaning and a way to go forward in life. Yeah.
That's deep. That's deep. Actually, that's deep. I love that. Yeah. And Marcel Williams loves that as well. Shout out to Marcel.
Shout out to Marcel.
I appreciate that. Steph.
So first of all, I feel so blessed with the excellence you've brought into the space, Kat. This has been phenomenal hosting, like really good. I feel like you've navigated us in a way that gave space for really important moments. And I don't think that's should go unrecognized and shouldn't be anything less than praise at the highest level. It's been really good. And from that, I want to say, Nadia, Evan, Mark, you again, Kat, thank you guys for doing this. This has been ridiculously skillful, ridiculously productive, ridiculously inspiring. Like when we were ideating this series and like how we're going to go about it, I was like, this is just going to be another good piece of content that we push out in the world and we actualize ourselves through. But this has been transformative in a way that I didn't see coming for myself. And I was just thinking about, as you're asking the question, just like and going back to some of the points Ryan made, where we don't allow ourselves the grace, confidence, and self-esteem to think we can have our cake and eat it too. And this is especially within the Black community. We only think that we always have this like happy to be here posture.
Yeah.
Like just happy to have even gotten an acknowledgement. But I'm sitting here thinking like I have my cake and eat it too. Like I feel like we've done something that will connect and build and grow meaning within people in a way that you just don't find elsewhere. Like I just can't find that on my Instagram timeline. So my space is deep appreciation right now. But going back to your question, what it's been like in the past 2 weeks is just like, I feel activated. I feel the emotions are oscillating. I feel angry at times. I feel disappointed, but mostly going back to like removing the oppressor from the narrative and coming together and thinking about, think about what we can do with Ryan again. Think about what we can do to build on Mark's idea as a framework. Think about Evan's point of view. Think about Nadia's input. Like, what can we do now and create actual structures that build us up? Like, how can this be a mode of being aside from a conversation? Like, I feel like I can actually embody some of these ideas and show up in my world with armor, with strength. And so for me, it's like, okay, now I'm feeling ready. I'm feeling like the world is conquerable. Like we can figure this out. Like we can get on even strong ground and move forward in a productive way. And so I just want to thank you guys. This has been honestly, again, transformative, inspiring, all the good stuff. And you guys have held space that is heavenly, elevated space.
Franny?
I'm super grateful for the community as well. Like I've been on the outside, but I'll constantly like peering in from jump. The times, honestly, in regard to like how I'm practicing, getting through this space is a different practice for me of sitting in and learning how to be comfortable with those feelings and like remembering all the times where I did feel like I couldn't breathe and that being like okay to have those times. Then like refortifying through all of these conversations and things like that and just feeling strangely validated for the arduous path that has come before this time. And if I didn't have all of that, I wouldn't feel so well prepared. So that social grace is so amazing to have. I feel like I've been here before. Things haven't changed and that I just like have new friends. and just like again, just coming to the table for human solidarity is so mind-blowing to me, in concept that I'm alive for it, that I'm still like young enough to enjoy it, and it's not just something that happens, you know, like in the older days of our lives where, you know, my responsibility for that time came and went.
Before I end with Ryan, I'm just gonna end with I'm just gonna say my bit, and my bit is that I'm really grateful that when I come off this call that I get to watch the Arsenal Man U game. And, that's the Premier League is gonna get me through the week, and I'm really grateful for my team. But yeah. Finally, Ryan, again, thank you so much for sharing space with us. Like, we're so incredibly grateful, and for your insight and your inspiration, and just kind of giving us a little bit of knowledge, and just everything that you've brought has just been really lovely. Nadia, was there something that you wanted to say while you're here?
No, sorry. Yeah, I was just running back. I'm finally free. We've hit 5 o'clock.
Okay.
But I guess you guys are wrapping up, so I would echo the sentiments of much gratitude for the time and space shared.
Do you have any recommendations or advice that you would provide to the community on how to show up for themselves in protecting their mental health, or any suggestions you have in terms of self-care?
Absolutely, and I love that you asked that. That's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So in terms of mental health, I strongly recommend a resource called Inkblot. I don't know if you guys have touched on it before, but it's virtual mental health services. It's counseling. There's nobody in the world who does not have to protect their mental wellness or their mental health. We all have mental health. We all have a state of it. And protecting it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Protecting it means that you are nourishing it in the same way you would be nourishing your body with water and good food, and your muscles with exercise. So to me, using that service has changed my life. It's a counseling service where you basically speed date counselors until you find one that matches you. The first guy I ever spoke to, nothing nice to say. Like, he wasn't, like, he's nice, that was about it. But the second lady I spoke to was so specific. So in any case, all to say, resources like Inkblot exist out there for people, and it's super simple, and there's no stigma in sitting in your house and FaceTiming a mental health practitioner and just telling them what's on your mind. So taking care of your mental health in that way is super important for absolutely everybody. And then outside of that, how to show up for yourself in your work, I think was the first thing that you mentioned. Not to limit yourself with the possibilities, and not to be too scared to ask for help. The resources now are coming out of the woodworks. The resources within the Black community, we're starting to really feed our own community at this point, and we're starting to put each other's businesses on. We're starting to shout each other's, the Black business owners and the people who are really showing up within the community. Those are people with valuable experience, valuable information. Those are people who you can ask. Very often you will find a great response. Like we talked about this on our last call, building our network. Like, look at a call like this. We've got 20 people who's been in and out throughout the night, throughout the day. That's a network of people. These are people coming together with a similar value and a similar interest, and with individual skills. So don't be afraid to lean on people, and don't be afraid to give back. Give back as often and tenfold as you do ask for help, because you are valuable as well, and you've got something to offer as well.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Thank you. Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And then Ryan, lastly, I'll end with you, obviously, as our guest, and just maybe some tips that you have, and specifically as an entrepreneur and as an owner of a business, and yeah, just maybe some closing thoughts that you have about the chat.
Yeah, thank you guys all for being a part of this and inviting me to share my perspective and be in a community like this where I can just freely express my emotions, my thoughts, angers, frustrations, all that in a space where you can do this is necessary. My word of the year has remained the same and only gets stronger as I go through this injury recovery, is perspective. Perspective is everything this year, especially with everything we're dealing with. The pandemic that started, the racism, the protests, the murders, the loss of jobs. Like there's so much happening right now. And I think perspective has been my word. And like now in my personal life, I now have an Achilles injury. So it's like, it's just continuous stuff, you know? But perspective has been my word for the year because I think when you, like, I feel like we're all aware that perspective exists. We're all aware, like even like on the very baseline of like communicating. Like right now, everything I'm saying to you guys are all interpreting it in your own way, right? Like you're all listening to me, but what you're listening to or what you're taking from it is different for all of you guys. You know what I'm saying? Even though I'm saying the exact same thing, you're all interpreting it in your own way differently. And acknowledging that exists is, I think, one of the most important things we have to understand, because we often forget. We're just like, you feel that like if I'm saying something, everyone should get this, and this is just how it should be because this is how I intend it to be. So this is what I'm saying. So you should all process the same way, and that doesn't exist. That's not how it works, right? And you know, a prime example is these race issues we're dealing with right now, right? I'm still struggling with it myself, but I'm getting over it because I'm like, there's a part of me where I'm like, there's no way white people don't know what's going on. Like, you know, like there's a part of me that's really like, there's no way you don't there's no way you don't know what's happening. But the perspective side of me is like, but there is. Like, this is not their perspective. This is not their life. This is not what they see. They don't wake up and have to worry about the things they have to worry about. They don't have money issues. They don't have issues getting a job. Like, that is not their experience. So me saying certain things to them is actually the first time they're hearing it. Like, it's actually the first time they're hearing certain things, you know? And it's tough for me to process because I'm just like, how? But perspective, right? And when you accept that, you acknowledge that, you'll take a step back because you're like, yeah, you're frustrated. Yeah, you're mad. We're all mad, of course. But you have to honestly view them like a kid. Like, not in a condescending way. Like, no, like seriously, but like not in a condescending way, like you guys are kids, but like the same way you teach a child, like a kid doesn't know math because they've never seen math. So you have to, it's our responsibility to baby these kids, baby these white people and people of non-color, not in a condescending way, but in a way of growth and understanding where it's like, they actually don't know what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? And not all of us have the energy to do that. And we all have a different role, right? My role specifically is I'm a talker. I speak up. I share things. I create. Not everyone needs to talk, right? Everyone has a different role. If it's to orchestrate these things, you might not be talking, but you orchestrate something. If it's to provide resources or provide funds or to invest in the business, then you invest. You don't need to talk. Everyone feels like they have to talk right now, right? And that's not what's needed. Everyone talking is not what's needed. You know what I'm saying? So we need to utilize our roles efficiently and properly with perspective, right? If you're a Black-owned millionaire and you're like, I'm not really good at talking, but I can put money somewhere, then look for a way to put your money somewhere. That's your role. You know what I'm saying? So, and the thing is, we as a Black community have to accept that other people have different roles, because we're critiquing these celebrities and people are like, oh, why haven't you said anything? They're not talkers. That is like, we can't get mad at a celebrity for not talking if they're not a talker. That's not their role here. You know what I'm saying? I don't know Drake's pockets, but I'm sure, and I know I've heard from other people that he's donated money somewhere. I don't need to hear Drake say I don't, like, it's not for us to critique how someone is making an impact or what they're doing and when they're doing it. That is not, we're not the all-seeing eye. You know what I'm saying? But acknowledging your role here and how you can contribute is what matters.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Not pointing at how someone else should be making a difference. You know what I'm saying? So I think when we break it down like that in perspective and accept that we all have a different role here, and to find that role and utilize it, I think that's the most important thing. It's not just to talk, and we can't critique people who don't speak if that's not their role. That is not, you know what I'm saying? So perspective. I think that is the most important thing this year for myself. I think for a lot of people to just understand that, like, how you see things is up to interpretation.
Yeah.
Getting mad at your coworker or your friend because they didn't know, because they're ignorant, whatever. Yeah, okay. But you have to acknowledge, and like Mark was saying, like he put himself in the position of the oppressor, and like we have to do that. Like if I was white and I barely knew black people and I've never had a problem getting a job and all these things, if that was my life, would I know this racism? Probably not. If I didn't come in direct contact with it. Like, you know what I'm saying? If I personally was not calling people nigger, if I personally, have black friends around me and we're chilling every day, if I personally, bring my black friends around my family and they love him, like, would I think racism exists? Probably not. I'd be like, well, I don't see it. Like, I'm not, and I don't, like, my friends say I'm fine. So, like, that's their reality, So for us to get frustrated and be like, oh, we've had this conversation. Yeah, we have. But we have to keep doing it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That just comes with our responsibility right now.
And I think on like maybe on an end note, that we're all kind of, as the social climate is continuing to unfold, that we're all finding our place within the revolution. And the word revolution in and of itself often brings me to tears, because I can't, it's like, it's one of those things where it's reimagining the world as we've known it for a century, for centuries, for 600 years, and so it really kind of opens up the possibility of where we all might be seated, and that each of the places that we're seated are equally as important as the other. If you're a talker, if you're a business person, if you're a community organizer, if you're an analytics person, whoever you are, like, you have your place, and your place is just as valuable as the next. And I have absolutely nothing more to say. And so we're so grateful for everybody, and I'm done. Yeah, that's it.
Yo, this is over 2 hours of chat. That's how good you guys are. Kat, Ryan, very high level stuff. Like this has been brilliant. This has been enriching in a way. Like, I scoured the world for moments like these, and now it's landed in my backyard, and I feel infinitely grateful for you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, can you plug yourself one more time before we go? Just your handles and all that.
My handles are the same on everything. 5 letters, MRKOA, Mr. KOA. My website is mrkoa.com. My Instagram, Mr. KOA. Very simple, short and sweet. And it's not Koa, it's KOA.
And Eternal Remedy, Steph or Mark, do you guys want to plug our next, or where we're at next?
Steph.
Tomorrow, 7 p.m. in the space again, we have King Evan holding the crown. He's gonna try and somehow outdo the level that Kat brought today, which is a tall order, Evan, but you might be the man.
It was high.
Saturday, again, 12 p.m., Queen Nadia steps up to the plate. Again, same commission in front of her. We have it popping. And then Sunday, obviously, the winner takes the cake. I'll be hosting at 7 p.m. So please be around for the next few days.
Hey. And go
Good job, guys. Good job. Well done.
All right. Bye, guys. Take it easy.
Peace and love.
See ya.
Lots of love.